You know, I was thinking whether I should do the last lecture on aging or multicultural Korea, and I decided on this because aging is related to this, okay? And this is something that's going to be such a major social trend in Korea that I think you guys should really know why this is happening and what you need to do to be ready for this new reality. Okay? You see, let me start with a question. Do you know of any other country other than Korea and Japan which have sort of brainwashed its people to believe that they are of single, homogeneous ethnic stock? I'm talking about countries. Okay? You look at any country that exists today. Do you know of any country other than Korea and Japan which based its sort of a nationalistic ideology on ethnic homogeneity? It's a question I'm posing because I want to know if there is any other country. Because if you think about it, every country is multicultural, has been multicultural for a very long time. But Japan, because it's an island, and because Korea, it's a peninsula, and you know, if you delve into history, you know that Japan, Korea, in no way are they ethnically homogeneous. Okay? There has been, or there had been, heavy mix, so to speak. Okay? To speak of Japan, for example, millions of Koreans migrated to Japan. Okay? Centuries ago, okay? And nobody knows, nobody really traces, you know, am I like 1/10 Baekje or Shilla, all right? And in the case of Korea, more painful history, right? Because we were occupied by foreign forces for an extended period of time by many, right, throughout Korean history. So we have that. So this idea of ethnic homogeneity is really sort of a misleading ideology that we, you know, as Koreans have sort of learned to believe. Okay, when in fact it's not really fact. And we're finally sort of experiencing something that most countries in the world have been experiencing, okay, from their birth even, okay? Because we started to really see foreigners' presence in Korea in sort of a considerable number from about the early 1990s. So we have this only, 30-year experience of really living with foreigners, okay? And right now, as of like 2014, we have about 1.8 million foreigners living in Korea, and that includes, you know, students like you, okay? People who are staying in Korea for an extended period of time. So we can't really, you know, point to that and say we're living in a multicultural society. But one number that really tells us, and that's sort of new from, let's say, 30 years ago, is the fact that we have more than 200,000 migrant brides, okay, from many parts of Asia who have come to Korea to marry Koreans. They live here, and they live here as permanent residents, and they, you know, their children, right? So so all of that adds to the ethnic sort of a diversity that Koreans have never been used to, okay? And what's going to happen in the future is this. Talking about like 30% of the population in Korea who are of foreign birth, by 2050, that proportion is expected to rise to as high as 15%. Okay? So we're really in this because it is irreversible. Okay? It's happening. It's going to happen more. Okay? So you have to live with this reality, and you really have to be a good citizen about it, right? So I have a little nice I mean, I really didn't know where to put this, but I wanted to add this to tell you that when it comes to North Korean defectors, we don't really accept them as true Koreans in a way. They're sort of ostracized, they're treated differently. Like the Chinese, Korean Chinese. Koreans from China who live in Korea. Okay? 조선족. We even treat them differently. Okay? So, what are we? Are we so honorable, glorious ethnic group that just shuns everyone who is sort of different from us? Are we that great? Anyway, and here's I don't know if you can see this. The question is this. Not the question, the point. Share that answered people of another race when asked to pick from groups of people they would not want as neighbors. Okay, so the higher the proportion, not so kind, right? And where is Korea? Red. Okay, so that means more than 40% of the respondents picked people of another race as people they would not want to have neighbors as. So this shows you sort of a racial / ethnic intolerance. Okay? So what's surprising is Africa. It's red like Korea. Oh, not this. No, that's India. You know, I failed geography when I was in grade 5. Sorry. Where is that? Oh, here it is. Sorry. This is India. Wow, me making this mistake draws more responses from than like when I tell a joke. So it's better for me to just be stupid. Okay. So I don't think we really had too much racial or ethnic conflict because we don't really have too many foreigners as neighbors, right? Am I true or not on that? Anyway, should I tell you a story about my sort of ethnic experience of where people of like Canada are so tolerant? See, I lived in the graduate student dormitory for a few years. Now, even though I lived in Canada for many years, I always loved eating kimchi for dinner. So I would have, cereal, toast, sandwich for lunch, breakfast and lunch. But dinner always had to be rice and kimchi. So for my kimchi love, I would have to buy a big jug of kimchi. So if you go to a Korean market anywhere in North America, you could buy a kimchi in small container or big. And as a very penny pinching student, I always bought a big bottle. Okay? Even though I could handle just one meal a day, a little bit, right? But because it made economic sense to buy a big one, so I'll buy this big one. But by the time I'm through 1/3 way through, the kimchi gets so fermented, right? And I have to tell you, the kitchen is shared with 3 other students. And maybe that itself is a little bit stinky in a way. But you see, when I have so much kimchi left, and that is so fermented, I make, kimchi jjigae. I make a soup with that totally smelly fermented kimchi. And I make a huge, what is the name? Huge pot full of kimchi jjigae, all right, with lots of pork. And can you imagine the smell that created? And the problem did not stop there. I would make it, and then every time I eat for the next 2 weeks, I have to warm it, right? By putting it in the stove and have it boiled. So every dinner time, the dormitory got really quiet. No one was around because it stank up the whole apartment in a way. But can you believe this? Nobody ever came to complain to me. And maybe that's why I didn't know how terrible this was for the other guys. Only when they held the party for my farewell party when I left the dorm, and many of them came and said, I really hate to see you go, but really one thing I really love about you leaving is that I won't have to smell that, whatever that was. My God, but that was so tasty. Anyway, we need to be that tolerant when the time comes, 20, 30 years later, okay? Because I think really living next to a neighbor who comes from a different culture is sort of the openness to whatever things you encounter. Okay? Anyway, this is what's in store for you. Wow, long list of things that we need to talk about. But I'll make sure that whatever I have to say, I'll do this in just 2 hours. Okay, so this should be updated to like 1.7, 1.8. And really a key, 2 keywords that you really need to realize about multicultural Korea is that this multicultural reality is now inevitable. And I'll explain to you why that is inevitable and irreversible. You cannot turn back, okay? And somehow make Korea to be ethnically homogeneous, because they're here, okay? And inevitable because we're going to talk about how we need to bring in more foreigners. When I say we need to bring in more foreigners, why? 2 reasons. If you have been reading the newspaper, you should know why. Why do I say, or why do Korean scholars say that we will have to bring in more foreigners? 2 reasons. Yes? Population is aging, and to be more specific, who are we bringing in for that? Young people who are, or who will be, laborers, right? So Korea will experience a labor shortage because Korea's fertility rate is one of the lowest in the world, okay? It is the lowest among the OECD countries. Koreans are typically having just 1 child, okay, per couple. 1 child, 1 baby. And of course, you really cannot blame them because it's such a tough, society to raise a child, right? Children get stressed out, parents get stressed out, and in a way, more stressed out than you guys, right? And I hope you guys are the last child, and your parents' worries are, in a way, halfway over. But it doesn't stop there, right? They'll now they'll be worried about your job that you have to be trying for. And then when it comes time to get married, it's about is she or is he getting the right, marrying the right person kind of thing. So the parent worries never end. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that later. Anyway, and what's the other reason why we will have to bring in more foreigners? Do I owe any Mexican coffee to anybody? What's the other reason? And this is really significant. No answer? The other reason is this. We don't have this anymore, but for a very long time, we had a very strong son preference. So from 1988, and I'm being very specific about the year, Korean women have had hundreds of thousands of abortions every year. And abortions were targeted at female fetus because we had, again, very strong son preference. Not anymore. We definitely now almost have daughter preference. Okay? You know, 20 years ago when we saw a young mother with like 2 sons, we were like, oh, she must be so happy. I'm so happy for you. Not anymore. When we see, you know, a mother with 2 boys, we go, oh, you know, we don't say it, right? But inside we go, I feel so sorry for you. But when we see, you know, a mother with 2 daughters, you know, we do always say, oh, so happy for you, and that is so true. You know, I have like 5 brothers and 1 brother, and each one of them has a single sex, you know, like siblings, like just sons, daughters. So my oldest brother, 2 sons. Second brother, 2 daughters. Third, 2 sons. Fourth, 3 girls. And my youngest older brother, 3 sons. I'm the only one with a daughter and son. So I saw all these nephews and nieces, right? And I really feel sorry for my sister-in-laws who have raised sons. Sons are just terrible. They're so selfish. And I'm a son myself, except Andrew Kim. Everyone is so selfish. Definitely not good for the mother, really. And sons are always fighting. I'm talking about when they're growing up. Okay? I'm not talking about when they're all grown up. I'm talking about in experiencing this parenthood. Raising sons is really living in hell. Yes? And this is really from a very personal experience. Although not having lived together, I made those observations. So if you have a choice, go with daughters. That's true. If you have to have a wish. Okay, so the point I was trying to get is this. Because we've had so many abortions, and so many female fetuses were aborted, what's going to happen? There will be a shortage of brides, in real terms. You see, we've had, migrant brides, and that was not because we have had bride shortages. We had to bring in brides from other parts of Asia because men in the countryside just could not find wives from Korea. Because who would want to marry a man in the countryside, farmer, a fisherman? Would you want? No. That's why these men, perfectly able and everything, but slightly lower middle class, right? They just could not find these consumer-oriented middle class, holding these middle class values. These women, even, these women with maybe just high school diplomas, they didn't want to go live in the countryside. So these men just could not find Korean wives. So they had no alternative other than to find wives from Vietnam, Cambodia, the Philippines, and so on. Okay? So that's what happened till now. But in the next, from about a few years, actually, if you just look at the population statistics, the bride shortage has already begun. So men in this room, how old are you guys now? Like 22? Hold on to your woman. Because by the time you're about to get married, like 8 years later, that's the worst time to get married. And we're talking about shortage of women. We're talking about like up to 20% shortage. Can you believe that? 20% shortage. I'm going to show you, that number may be slightly exaggerated, but definitely 10 to 15% shortage. You guys, I'm sure no problem. KU graduates, right? They will have nice jobs and all that. So, but if you have any friends who are graduates of Yonsei, tell them to be worried. Yes. Yeah. So it is said that in India alone, there are 30 million extra males. Okay? And China, same thing. So And what brought about this, all these extra numbers of males? Which technology? Ultrasound. And that's why I said since 1988, because that's when ultrasound became available in Korea. And with that, you find the sex of the fetus, and if it happened to be a female, my God, so many, right? And okay, now we move on to the. So from 2000 2008, this shows you the rate of increase in numbers of foreigners in OECD countries. Korea number one. Okay? And it's still an ongoing thing. Okay? So trends of global migration, it's a repetition, it's irreversible and inevitable, or it's inevitable and irreversible. Okay? And it's just something new to us, but from time immemorial, every country, not I wouldn't say from time immemorial, but from a long time ago, sort of countries or either migrant sending or migrant receiving country. Okay? But it has become more sort of universalized in this age of globalization. Okay? So I think the two key things are these two, right? International migration has become universalized because practically every country, I mean, you could really delete this, right? Because every country, even North America, even North Korea has migrant, it's a migrant sending country, right? Because it sends migrant workers to all these countries, and it's have these this evil country has these workers work and send every little penny they earn back to not to their families but to the government. Okay, so again, if you want to mention the most closed society in the world, it's North Korea. And even North Korea is affected by migration because it sends migrant workers. Okay? So, again, you could easily delete this. Every country of the world is affected by international migration as either sending or receiving country. Right? And this universalization of international migration is irreversible and inevitable because why do people migrate? The reason is typically economical or political, right? Political in the sense of if there is a political oppression or war, people do migrate or seek refugee status or seek asylum, right? Just for fun, which countries have the highest percentage of migrants? United States, I think in terms of the number, it'll be number one. Okay? But we're talking about percentage. Are you thinking? A country in the Middle East. No, I think it's one of the countries. Because you know why countries in the Middle East have such a huge proportion of foreigners living there? Because it's in this construction boom, the last half a century. And it's still ongoing. You have so many migrant workers, and number one is Qatar, 87%. So let's say the population of Qatar is 10 million. 8.7 million are foreigners. Okay? United Arab Emirates, 70%, Jordan, Singapore, Saudi Arabia. I'm just skipping this. Okay? Okay, so you think this could be on the exam? Yes or no? Maybe. Then the answer from me is maybe. This could be on the, if he said yes, I would have said yes, this will be in the exam. Since he said maybe, this could be an exam or not be an exam. We can identify 5 general trends of international migration. So even if before I said it, you should have sort of, this should have been on your radar. Oh yeah, this is a good thing to really focus on. 5 general trends of international migration. Number 1, very simple generalization. Globalization of migration. Okay? This is something that I mentioned earlier. Every country in the world is affected by migration. Okay? That's what globalization of migration is. 2, acceleration of migration. So more people are, moving abroad as migrants. Okay? Number 3, differentiation of migration. Now, migration now includes not only labor migration and bride migration, but also migration involving refugees. Okay, some people moving as permanent residents or just temporarily, and people going abroad to study, right? Like many of you are in this room. Okay, so differentiation of migration is a 3rd trend of international migration. Number 4, the feminization of migration. So more women are migrating. Okay? Growing politicization of migration. So because many more people are migrating, it has become an important political issue, okay, between states. Okay? Can you handle this? 5 trends. And if I say, let's say I have this in exam as a short answer type. If you just were to list these 5, would you receive a full mark? Yes or no? No. You need to provide additional information as to what this means. Okay? Why do you think you should write as much as you can? Because if it's worth 15 points, you cannot expect to receive full 15 points for just listing this. It takes 2 minutes to memorize this. The least you can do is to give supportive, details, right? What was I going to say? Oh, since I'm talking about migration, one worrying trend that I see is this. When Korea was not really that well off, we had tens of thousands of Koreans immigrating to countries like the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. But as of last year, less than 1,000 people immigrated. So it may be a sign that we're finally well off enough that nobody really goes anywhere. But we live in the age of globalization. So the stage that you should really be living is not just Korea, but the world. The world stage is yours to take. And yet, when I see young people in Korea, they are in such a comfortable zone, living in Korea, just living here, enjoying kimchi every day, but not really wanting to go, outside. I'm not talking about outside the home, outside your city. Even within Korea, we have such a Seoul-focused mindset, right? Everything has to be in Seoul. But you're young. You need to just go out and explore, experience, get out. Just because you have the whole country tour of Korea that you're somehow anywhere, better than others. Yes, you may be, but you really need to have this grand ambition of, I don't want to call it ambition. Life is short, right? You've heard this many, many times. So just, you gotta really sort of see things, see the world, and don't really have to follow the path that your parents want you to take and sort of the safe path. I don't know if you've heard, and maybe I said this before, at the top schools in the United States, the basic idea is sort of to have them become entrepreneurs. Okay? Explore the unexplored, taking chances, taking risks, to make something of yourself. But what is the typical goal of students at top universities in Korea? It is to get a job at the safest places, right? Like public corporations, Samsung, LG. And if you get a job there, what do you do? With all the education you've had, with all the training you had, desk job. You know how boring desk job is? Even high school graduates can do that. Okay? And because there's such a high competition among applicants, it happened, the graduates of the top schools get those jobs just because you have better qualifications, but the things you'll have to do not require university education. Mark my words. White-collar jobs, okay? I'm not, except, let's say, like accounting. And if you want to think of white-collar jobs, look at the things that people do at the administrative office. 학사지원부. When we have an opening at 학사지원부, we get like 100 applicants, more than that. And they usually have jobs somewhere else, like Samsung, LG. They all want to come here because it's a secure job, good pay, and it's really like 9 to 5. You don't really work till like 10, 11. So we have these top applicants coming to this, applying for this job because it is a good job. But if you look at what they do, again, it does not require university education. And the job that you'll be getting will be the same. Okay? So that's why some people get, disenchanted. Did I study all this to do this? The reality is, yes. So job satisfaction is not high. Typically, Koreans who get white-collar jobs. Okay? So, enjoy life. Job is just to make money, really. So, I don't know if this is making sense to you, like exploring the world, traveling, living in India for a year. India is not. I shouldn't say. Because there have been so many reports, right? Talking about places that are safe, okay? But outside, like Europe and North America, I think when you think of a place to go, it's always sort of a comfortable zone, right? Or comfort zone. So think outside the box, go to places outside the box. Anyway, theories of migration. So we have these millions of people who migrate, and the question is, why do people migrate? Okay? And there are some theories. Number one, and do you think this will be an exam? Yes. She said yes, and I'll go with that. This will be in the exam. Theories of migration. So this tries to tell us why people migrate. Number one, and it's called historical structural approach, and it'll take some explanation. So what it is what is capitalism? Capitalism is about making profit. Okay? I mean, that's like number one principle. Okay? And one of the ways that entrepreneurs or businesses or corporations make money is to utilize cheap labor. Okay? I mean, the reason why the Walmart is what it is because it relies on cheap labor. Okay? So, although for this case Walmart is not a good example because it just buys, products made by cheap labor from outside the United States. But the point here is because making profit is intrinsic to capitalism, it always wants to utilize cheap labor. And one of the ways it does is to bring in cheap laborers from outside the country. Okay? So that's historical structural approach. For example, look, can you tell me the examples throughout the world history where migrants were brought in so that their cheap labor can be utilized? Yeah? They brought in from Algeria, former colonies, right? So that's a very good example. And I think that's very typical of many former colonial powers to utilize cheap labor from their ex-colonies. Okay? What else? Any other examples? Any example from the United States? I mean, the United States went as far as to bring in cheapest labor possible, right? Slaves, right? And what about the more recent United States American examples? You're an American. Hispanic population, that's really recent. But before that, let's say the turn of the 20th century. No, turn of the 19th century. No. Turn of the 20th century. Yeah, 20th century. We're now living in the 21st century, right? I'm talking about Chinese laborers who were brought in to build railroads, right? That's an example of this. Okay. Any other examples? Yeah. Singapore. Okay. Malaysian workers from India too. Okay. So again, migration is intrinsic to capitalism because capitalism is in the game of making profits, and it wants to utilize cheap labor that's available in developing countries. Okay? Number two, dual labor market theory. This one is also a very interesting theory. And it talks about why migrant laborers is needed. Now, if you look at the case of Korean workers migrating to Germany in the 1960s and 70s as miners and nurses, because in the 1960s and 70s, mining or working as a miner was shunned upon or was shunned by Germans. Also nursing. Nursing is now much more highly regarded, okay? Even in Korea. Nurses, I don't know what you think about nurses, but I talked to professors who teach at the nursing faculty. Their starting pay is like close to 40 million won a year. Okay? So I think it's got much better than ever before. And with about 20 years experience, you earn close to or about OK. Okay? But back in the 1960s and 70s, nursing was shunned by Germans. Okay? Because again, it was sort of looked down upon, and so you have this, when a country reaches a certain level of economic standard, people there shun certain jobs. Okay, jobs that are low paying and less prestigious, and these jobs we call in Korea 3D jobs, right? And the 3Ds stand for? Is this a popular term in the West or not? 3D jobs. D. 3Ds are? Dirty, dangerous, difficult. Now in Japan, it is called 4D jobs. And I think this is better than 3D jobs. The fourth is demeaning. It makes perfect sense, right? 4D jobs. So in wealthy countries, people with higher education and certain level of standard, living standard, they shun away from certain jobs. This is a universal trend. And has this happened in Korea or not? Of course it happened. Why? You know, we have hundreds of thousands of migrant workers working at farms, fishing villages, and small factories. Because people do want to work at big factories like Hyundai Motors or Samsung, whatever, because they pay well. But at small factories, the pay is, relatively lower, and nobody can say. I mean, if you're a factory worker at Samsung, you just proudly say, I work for Samsung. But if you work for Dongji factory in some, Bondak, you sort of say, okay, I work at somewhere, but again, so the idea is, but 30 years ago, we had no problem filling those positions at small factories. But now we do. Small factories and even medium-sized factories cannot find workers because workers, would-be workers, young people I'm talking about, they would rather work at department stores, earning even less money because that is more prestigious than working at a factory. Okay? But our industrialization was achieved largely because by the sweat and blood of these factory workers. But we have reached this level of economic standard, and now we don't want to work at factories, except at big factories with high salaries. That's why this is what's happening in Korea. Many small to mid-sized factories have a very hard time finding workers. So that's why they have to turn out, find workers from outside Korea. Okay? And these workers typically come from, of course, developing countries. And third theory of migration is the new economics of migration. And this sees migration as a family or household decision aimed at maximizing income and minimizing risks to family income. Okay? So this theory argues that migration is a conscious choice made by a family in order to ensure that they have a sort of a backup plan when the economy that they live in, does not do well. But it always helps to have someone working outside the country to help them in case there is any kind of a setback. Okay? Push-pull theory, this would be the most familiar theory, right? Push meaning something negative, right? So, push-pull theory argues that there are negative factors in societies that you live in that make you go out and migrate to a better place. Okay? Whereas, the destination societies have these pulling factors. So the push factors would be what? Typically low wages, poor living standards, and what else? Push factors are like these: poverty, high rates of unemployment, lack of economic opportunities, low living standards, high levels of violence. So if you look at these, and you know why people from developing countries want to migrate, okay? And not all apply to any given society where they have a high rate of migration, but at least some of them, right? And pull factors are better job opportunities, the opposite of what you just saw. High living standards, higher wages, economic opportunities, educational opportunities, and so on. Okay, so, well, we talked about the economic development of Korea, and for people living in developing countries, Korea is a land of opportunity. Okay, because they may make what $2,000 a month by working really hard, including overtime, hours. $2,000 or even a month may not be a large amount of money for you guys, but for them, that is 3 times, 4 times what they would have made working the same hours, doing the same thing. So that is why these migrant workers are experiencing what our workers experienced back in the 1960s and 70s in Germany. Okay, so and they are filling in for us. Okay, so we need to be more kind to them. Number 5, and this is this explains why typically women migrate as brides, and it has to do with what is called hypergamy. Okay, hypergamy refers to this practice in India that expects women of subcaste within a caste to marry higher ranked men than their own. Okay? So in India, there are several main castes, but within each caste, there is also a subcaste, and women are expected to marry someone of higher subcastes. Okay? So when women from, let's say, Cambodia marry Korean men, it is hypergamy, okay? Because in a very typical cases, they're not marrying Korean men for love or out of love. It is solely to, achieve, right, higher status. Okay? So maybe even among us, isn't it true that women typically want to marry someone of higher status? Someone with more money than themselves, better job, better education? Yes or no? Yeah? Why is that? I think the day that we I could expect, better gender equality than the current sort of situation is when women can say, I could marry this guy although he has nothing. Not nothing, but not really always wanting to meet someone who with a higher status. Okay? So does this make sense? Hypergamy? Okay, continuing influx of migrant workers. So, maybe I should. Okay, so Korea. Let me go back. So we have influx of migrant workers, not because we have a labor shortage. We don't have that problem anymore yet. Okay, but we have labor shortage because of the dual labor market theory. Okay, wealthier Koreans, better educated Koreans, they turn away from certain occupations. Okay, especially those in 3D or 4D jobs. So that's why Korean government needed to coordinate policies to bring in foreign workers. So the number of foreign workers has greatly increased, and I hope this could be updated soon. But you can see how tens of thousands of workers migrated to Korea each year. Okay? And of course, after 3 years, many of them left, although some stayed behind. Out of 1.8 million foreigners living in Korea, we have about 300,000 who are illegally staying in Korea. And those illegal migrants are typically migrant workers, okay, who are overstaying. And the number of migrant workers in Korea, this is a total number. Okay? 2013, 520,000. Okay? And number of migrant workers, and from the beginning, Korea attracted workers from a dozen or so Asian countries, including China, Indonesia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and the Philippines. They're all developing economies, right? And more recently, workers from practically all over the world, including Russia, India, Uzbekistan, Brazil, and Nigeria. And they are typically in the 3D jobs, such as those in construction, auto parts, textiles, furniture manufacturing, and other small and mid-sized manufacturing industries. So the furniture that you sleep on, chances are made by migrant workers. Okay? And the car that you drive or that you ride on, auto parts, made by migrant workers. Okay? And also in farming and fishing, you have many migrant workers. In terms of the registered number of foreigners by nationality, Korean Chinese is the largest group. It's something that I don't think too many of you know. The largest number of foreign workers, because they have Chinese citizenship, because they are Joseonjo, but they are of Korean ethnic heritage. Okay? That's rather fast. Okay? So, multicultural reality is caused by a large number of migrant workers, and migrant workers have been coming into Korea because of labor shortage. Okay? Not because we have actual labor shortage, but because many Koreans shun away from certain jobs. Okay? Now, we sort of talk about this rapid aging of the population as a cause for further influx of migrant workers. So why is the second factor? The first factor was that Koreans shunned away from certain jobs. That's why we needed to bring in migrant workers. And the second factor that will bring in more workers to Korea is due to the rapid aging of the population and the resulting labor shortage. So until now, we experienced this artificial labor shortage because Koreans shunned from certain jobs. But because of the aging of the population, there will be an actual labor shortage in the near future. Because Korea is now the most rapidly aging society in the world. Most rapidly. How rapid is this? I'll show you. It's aging at the rate of like twice as fast as the global rate. Yeah? So these are universally recognized terms and characteristics. A society is considered an aging society when 7% of the population comprises the elderly. Okay, that's those who are 65 years old or over. Society becomes an aged society when 14% of its population comprises of the elderly. Okay? Now, Korea became an aging society in 2000. That's not bad, you know? But look at how Korea will make a transition to an aged society in 2019. Now it's down to 2018. So Korea will take how long to make the transition? 18 years. You think there will be a record or not? World record? Yes or no? Yes. It's a record. World record. Guinness World Record. The current world record is held by which country? Japan. So we're all very happy that we're beating the Japanese record. Or record held by Japan. Okay? And then Korea will then become a super aged society. So the key phrases that you have to know. Aging society, 7%. Aged society, 14%. Super aged, 20%. And Korea will become a super aged society in 2026. So it'll take how many years? 8 or 9 years, right? Now, do you think that will be a record or not? World record. Yes. The current record is held by Japan. We're going to beat Japan again. My God. Here we go. This is a very important table. So look at other countries. Germany, Italy, USA, Sweden, France. It took, for example, Germany, 40 years to make a transition from 7% to 14%, and another 40 to make a transition from 14 to 20%. And look at Sweden, or France. It took 115 years to make a transition from an aging society to aged society. Another 41 years to make a transition from 14 to 20%. Now, don't look at Korea's rate. The current record is held by Japan. It took Japan 24 years to make this transition, 12 years to make this transition. But here comes Korea. Da, 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 da. Again, it's either 28, it's down to 2018 now. Okay? It'll take Korea only 18 years. Okay? And from 14 to 20%, not even 10 years. Are we crazy or not? Are we so bent on beating Japanese record that we're just not having children? I don't know what the hell is going on. This is terrible. You shouldn't be laughing, really. Because, as I'll show you a little bit later, by 2050, half of the population will comprise of the elderly. So if you get on the subway, you know how right now, the last corner seats are reserved for the elderly, right? By 2050, half of the seats in the... I'm not kidding, that's what's gonna happen. Half of the seats in the subway train will be reserved for the elderly. And maybe the elderly will just fight amongst themselves. How old are you now? I'm 85, you're 75? Did I say a hand over there? Yeah?
I was wondering how Koreans can take care of all these people.
That's why we're in big trouble right now, So that's why we have to bring in more migrants, yes? That's one way we could sort of deal with this situation. It's quite shocking, isn't it? And you guys will be burdened with taking care of the elderly. Right? So, I wanted to show you this to show you how aging is a global phenomenon, okay? But what's different among countries is the speed at which the society is experiencing aging. And what's worrisome about Korea is that it is aging so fast, okay? And we're going to talk about this. Why is Korea aging so fast? Can you tell me an answer about this? Why is Korea aging so fast? Why? I mean, what determines the rate of aging in any given society? What are the two main factors for the aging of a given society? Yes. Yes. Increased life expectancy. That's one. Number two?
That's right.
More important one.
That's right.
Yes. And we use the phrase fertility rate. Okay? And fertility rate in Korea is very, very low. Alarmingly low. And if you have to ask yourself, why are Korean people having so few children? And let's say you're a policymaker or the president. Have you ever thought about why Koreans have so few children? Then the society is not doing anything about it. If you ask me to name one thing that makes Koreans have so few children, number one reason is education. Okay? Education where not only did you guys study so hard, but also the loss of hope. And don't take this personally, because I say this as a concerned citizen. Because we need to do something to make our society a better place to live. A place where people with even nothing can have some hope that their children can do better. But the way it is now, people from poor families, they have no hope. And our society can do better than that, you see. And I'm not here to really talk about what needs to be done. If you want to know, visit me in my office. Okay. So proportion of those aged 65 and above, look at this. In 1960, it was only 2.9%. I'm talking about those who are aged 65 or above. It was only 2.9% in 1960. It's going all the way up by 2050, and that's only 20, 35 years from now, 38% of the population will comprise of the elderly. That's almost like 1-to-1. So do you think we need to do something about this or not? Just let it happen? If this fertility continues to happen, you know what's going to happen? Okay, this is the population distribution of Korea, 1970, 2010, you see the population there. The population by 2050 will decline. Current population in Korea is 51 million. By 2050, it'll dwindle to 42 million. And if the current fertility rate continues, Korea will become extinct by 2700. And you know, a healthy population distribution in any given country is this, okay? Not too many old people, but a lot of young people, and who will become future what? Workers, okay? Ants. But in 2010, you know, you guys laughed at this, but seriously, society is in the business of surviving to the next generation. Okay? So I don't know if you've ever thought about this problem, but you know, when there was a hippie movement in the 1960s in the United States, you guys are familiar with this? Do you think the government was worried, or just let it happen? Young people, just, they're going to get back to the census. No, the US government was seriously worried. Because if we're talking about all these people who are highly educated, all of a sudden, not being fixated on making money, you know, and wanting to buy houses. Because that's very dangerous to society. Okay, society thrives on people, you know, wanting to be ants, you know, wanting to work hard and wanting to save money and buying houses. Why? They all contribute to the workings of the economy. But there was this hippie movement. They all wanted to just free themselves from the shacklings of society and just enjoy themselves, right? And the movement, if it got out of hand, would have had all these young people not wanting to go to university, not wanting to work, just partying all the time. And that really worried the United States government, and that's why it started to do something to crack down on this movement. Like, you know, imprisoning people for having long hair. I'm just kidding. That never happened. So what are the reasons for the rapid aging of the population in Korea? I already mentioned. Just mention these and I'll let you go. I already mentioned the increased life expectancy. Look at this. It was 67 in 1983, but in 2003, it's 77, and it's currently over 80 years old. Okay? And number two, more important reason, all of them, it's okay. Number two is, more compelling reason for the rapid aging of the current population is the alarmingly low fertility rate. Okay? And we're going to continue from this very slide next Tuesday at 8 o'clock.